Hi, welcome to the NASCAR and NBC Podcast. Nate Ryan back here with another post-race edition of the podcast, Post-Phoenix, where we are joined by NASCAR and NBC analyst Jeff Burton. The mayor is back. And Jeff, I don't know if you remember this, but I looked it up. The last time you were a guest on the NASCAR and NBC podcast was 1 year ago. Actually, 1 year, 5 days, and a pandemic ago, March 10th, 2020, also after the Phoenix race last year. So welcome back a year later. We're here to talk Phoenix again.
I'm glad you said that, because when you started, I was thinking to myself, I feel like it's been forever since I've been on this podcast. What a crazy time. What a crazy year. It's hard to even think back to that. I was in Phoenix for that race weekend, and I can remember, not wanting to shake people's hands and not really understanding. And of course, it really started to unravel the following week. And it was a very strange time. And I'm glad to be back with you, because it is a sense of normalcy for me.
It's a sense of normalcy to have you back and doing this again, as we've been doing since the start of the 2021 season. We're back to doing the post-race podcast. We didn't do them nearly as much last year after the first 5 races, but had Steve Wittart the last 4 races. Great to have you here. And it's funny because I was looking back at what we talked about a year ago and some of the things we're going to hit today. Restarts, Joe Gibbs Racing. I want to start, of course, with the winner of the race, Martin Truex Jr. Jeff, he scrubs the wall on lap 11 while running 4th. He makes 2 stops where the crew makes all these repairs, major adjustments. And then for whatever reason, his Toyota goes supersonic, and he goes from I think the next restart, he went from the high teens to the top 5, and he was lights out the rest of the day. So if you have to explain what you think happened with Martin Truex Jr. here, how would you do it? Because my experience has been in covering NASCAR, when you put the right side of your car in the wall, that usually does not improve handling or speed.
Not normally, but he didn't really hit it that hard. And as far as his speed, we shouldn't be surprised. We see, I think Martin Truex Jr. Marching through the field, in a lot of cup races is something that's become normal, having to start in the back or something happened. It seems like he's able to pass people quicker than most other guys. And the winless streak is really way more surprising to me than that he won this weekend, because, winning comes normally from speed. And when I think about Martin Truex Jr. and his team, they're fast. They're fast, it seems like, all the time. They haven't been able to connect all the dots. And there's been times they've been really fast in the middle portion of the race and not at the right time of the race. But typically I would put them, in the top 5 as far as cars that make lap time. And so that's kind of what we saw, him marching through the field on Sunday after those issues is something we see a lot. And it didn't surprise me at all. And I think too, I think that team becomes more dangerous. I don't believe that momentum creates success. I think success creates momentum, right? Fast race cars, or rather slow race cars and bad drivers don't create momentum, right? That's not what happens. But I think now that team's even more dangerous. I think that they got that win. I think it feels like to them, okay, we've had all this bad stuff happen to us. We've pushed it aside. And now we're going to go win a bunch of them. And it wouldn't surprise me one bit if they did that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, you mentioned that winless streak, Jeff. It was 29 starts without a victory. And I think even more significant is that it's only his second victory in 44 Cup races for Martin Truex Jr. And of course, that coincides largely with Cole Pearn leaving as his crew chief after the 2019 season. James Small has been his crew chief since the start of the 2020 season. And it seemed like on the pit box after that Phoenix victory, there was just an explosion of emotion. James Small, obviously, celebrating. Truex was, very emotive as well. I mean, did it seem like this was a victory maybe that this team needed after, Truex has had such a run of success with Cole Pearn and making the championship round so many years and winning the 2017 championship. It seemed like this was, I don't know, maybe a breakthrough win in a way for this team.
I think so. And I think, my experience has been that when you have a string of things start happening to you that don't allow you to win, or you make a mistake or whatever, you almost start to expect them. And when you start to expect them, that's when they come. So it's crazy attitude. Like when you expect things to go well, that's a completely different attitude. It's a completely different mindset. And don't get me wrong, I don't think this team's a bunch of doom and gloomers that, the world's coming to an end. But over time, when you go that long without winning, it wears on you. And regardless of what drivers and crew chiefs and anybody in sports, or for that matter, in life, tell you, especially in sports, you're always compared to the person that you're competing against, or the person that you replaced, or the person that replaced you. Right. And so if you're James Small, there has to be this sense of, oh, wow, I mean, this team winning championships and winning tons of races and leading tons of laps, and now I'm the crew chief and we haven't been able to do that. It's human nature, right? And it's sports. That's what sports are, Nate. You're comparing yourself to the competition. That's what it is. And so you can't get away from it. So I think for James Smalls and his team, Martin Truex Jr., I do think it was a really important win early in this season that I think they can use to their benefit.
Do you know much about James Small, Jeff? I mean, I'll admit, like, I know that obviously he was a part of Cole Pern's team before becoming crew chief, but being robbed of being at the track nearly as much last season as both you and I were, you were there a little bit more than me. I don't know much about this guy. What do you think the playbook is on James Small as crew chief?
High energy. I think he has tons of confidence. Seems like full of life. Loves challenges. Listen. One of the things that this pandemic has done, Nate, is it's taken. I don't care. These things that we do, away from each other, aren't the same as personal interaction. And the thing that I miss the most about being able to be at the racetrack and be in the garage isn't the, hey, you have a 10 o'clock meeting with James Smalls. It's when you run into the garage, when you run into each other in the garage and you end up talking to each other for 15 minutes, that wasn't scheduled, wasn't planned. That's when you really get to know people. And that's when you really get to learn who they are. And that's when they tell you things they wouldn't otherwise tell you. It's just completely changed the dynamic. I can't wait till we can get back in the garage and have those conversations, because I don't know James Smalls as well as I would have if I was able to spend the last year at the racetrack and look in his eyes in those tough moments, to see his body language, all those types of things you miss.
Yeah. How many times have you leaned on a stack of tires and talked with somebody for 10 minutes when it wasn't scheduled? I mean, like,
hey, listen, Latart and I, we ended up in a conversation at Kentucky a couple of years ago with a couple crew chiefs that we were just walking through the garage, hanging out, and ended up in this 45-minute conversation. And it was awesome. Like, we learned so much about so many things, and that unplanned 45-minute conversation, and those are the things that we miss.
Yep. So you mentioned the damage probably wasn't that significant, but yet it still required a couple of pit stops, a lengthy stop that was almost a minute long. And at first, Truex didn't seem as convinced that they had fixed it. And why would he have confidence they had fixed it? Has that ever happened to you, Jeff? Like in your career, when you have a car that drives better after a situation like that, after you sustain some damage? And is it helpful, I guess, talking about this relationship driver to crew chief, is it even more of a confidence builder when your crew chief can say, hey, I got this, trust me, I can fix it, and then your car becomes a winning car?
Yeah, sometimes there's things that don't make sense from the driver's seat, and that's where, we talked about it earlier, mindset matters. Like, you have to assume that you're going to drive into turn one and it's going to stick, right? Yeah. I mean, if you drive into turn one assuming it's not, how are you going to drive it? And so, having confidence and Martin, with the experience that he has, just knowing, okay, let's go drive this car to the limit, go get all I can get out of it, and trusting, right? Even though he's second guessing it, still trusting that it's going to stick and trying to, and then continue to give that information to the team. It's so important. Like, you can't quit in this sport. So many drivers, I love to, if I'm at home and I'm not at the racetrack, I like to roll through drivers' scanners when things aren't going well. And not just to get the one-liner, oh my God, he said this, but to get the mindset, right? And so what's the information coming from the driver? What is it? Is it, this car sucks, this car is a piece of crap? Well, how do you fix that? Right? I mean, if you're a crew chief, how do you fix that? This is the biggest piece of junk. We got to creep, like, the drivers that stay in the game right? And they're like, okay, here's what I'm dealing with. And here's why I can't do what I need to do. They give themselves the best chance for those guys in the garage to be able to build a plan and make the car better. And that's something that, a guy like Martin Truex Jr., he's calm, he's composed. I think that helps him in those situations.
Yeah, it's that grace under pressure that sometimes we miss, that, like I've heard you say it a number of times, it's supposed to be hard. So when you have something like what happened at Phoenix and then you overcome it, that's what your job is, right? You're supposed to be a problem solving team that can overcome things like that.
Well, the other thing, Nate, is that, one of the things that I still don't think that we cover as well as we need to in this sport is we still focus old school wins. And listen, wins is everything. Winning is everything. But top fives and top tens, right? We still cover that like we did 20 years ago. We need to stop doing that. What matters is the points earned.
Yep.
Right? And so in today's world, stages matter. How you finish in these stages matters. And every single lap matters more than it ever has at any point in this sport's history. So you can't give up early. You can't do it. You've got to keep fighting. And then if you don't get those stage points, that makes it even more important to go get a good finish, because you got to make up for what you lost early in the race. So never, in my opinion, and I think it's obvious, never before in our sport has the green flag to checkered and everything in between mattered more. And it used to be, way back, it was only where you finished. Well, today it's total points earned. That's what ultimately matters. And a good example, Ryan Blaney finished 10th yesterday. He got 43 points because he won a stage and he finished 5th in a stage. Kyle Larson, because he had his speeding penalties, he finished 9th and 13th. He got 32 points, finished 7th. Ryan Blaney got 43, finished 10th. Which would you rather be today? Right. So that mindset of how we're going to approach this race from the moment the green flag drops, and in those times of disappointment, in those times of things going well, that matters, and you have to find a way to recover.
I would encourage everybody to start looking at playing NASCAR fantasy for this exact reason, because the light bulb has kind of come on for me on stage racing and how much points matter because of that. Because I had both Blaney and Kyle Larson as options yesterday, and I actually benched Kyle Larson because of exactly that. I knew, even though it looked like Larson might get a top 5, I mean, if you're looking at the stage points and usually you have to make that decision right near the end of stage 2 on who you want to keep in your lineup and which driver you want to put in the garage. And I'm always looking now at which drivers have the most stage points, because we're seeing a lot, Jeff, where a lot of guys are finishing, like you mentioned, Blaney. It seems like more often we're seeing guys finish outside the top 10, but outscore guys who finish 6th to 10th a lot.
Yeah, it's your point about fantasy racing is spot on. It really opens your eyes. But I watch every race today differently than I ever have, and because it's if you don't win, right? What's so different about NASCAR today is also what's the same about NASCAR today. Points have always mattered, and when people say the only thing that matters is winning, that's wrong. No, winning matters. Winning is more important than anything. No question about that. But there's only one winner. And at the end of the day, and at the end of the playoff, when the playoffs start, everything you did during this regular season matters. So, points matter today as much as they ever have. And look at it. How many times do we see somebody not advance into the playoffs, or advance it from one stage to the next, one round to the next, rather, in the playoffs because of one damn point, right? Think about that. 1 point keeps people from going from one round to the next. It's insane. So you have to look at points, and you have to look at total points earned, and you have to look at stage wins. Yep.
Points matter more than ever. I remember you saying that actually when the first year of stage racing in 2017, you came on and sort of explained that and really framed that well. And of course, what mattered the most in this race, Jeff, was the final restart. That was the determining factor in Truex beating Joey Logano for this win at Phoenix. And it was funny. I went back and again, I listened to our March 10th, 2020 discussion about the Phoenix race a year ago. When Logano won that race, he won it on a restart. And it's the same situation where he picked the inside lane. A year ago, he wins from the inside lane. this past Sunday, he chooses the inside where he'd been all day and where he had the most success. And Truex managed to stay with him on the outside. And as Logano explained, that outside car can control the restart. And Truex clearly had the best car in the second half of that race, and he gets the victory. So, definitely, I want to get your take on the restart, but I also want you to frame it. I know you will, that this is not going to be looked at in a vacuum, because this is where the championship race is going to be held on NBC, November 7th, 2021. NASCAR Cup Series comes back here. They'll be crowning a title winner at Phoenix, and I'm sure people are going to be really looking at that restart and understanding what it means.
Well, listen, you're exactly right. And I think what's difficult about it, though, is we have an ever-changing racetrack, right? Yeah. I mean, the track on Saturday was completely different than the track was on Sunday. This addition of the traction compound makes it so you don't know what the track's going to be like when you go back, in November. That makes it difficult for the drivers and teams. And then on top of that, there's other things you can't control. So you mentioned it. Joey Logano won this race, on a restart on the bottom of the racetrack and went and won the race. So he took the lead and picked the bottom on other restarts, and it worked for him. So why wouldn't you pick the bottom, right? Why wouldn't you pick the bottom? So the reason what changed was the job that Martin Truex Jr. did. Like what you have to do is step back. If you're Joey Logano, you have to look back and say, okay, what did I do in the restart zone that allowed Martin to get the start that he did? Because the launch was great by Martin Truex Jr. And so why does that matter so much? It matters because if you're Joey Logano and you enter turn one and you're not clear of the guy, the spotter, he's saying outside, outside, outside. Well, you're down on the apron of the racetrack. Like, you're so far from the racetrack and you can't see the guy on the outside of you. You literally can't see him. So when Joey Logano is hearing outside, 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 he doesn't know where outside is. And he's got to merge back onto the racetrack from being 25 car lengths away from the racetrack, widths away from the racetrack. Where do you merge onto the track? And so when he came back up, and he essentially came back up to the bottom of the racetrack. He couldn't enter the corner in the middle of the racetrack. Well, that completely destroyed his angle of attack into turn one. That made his center of the corner speed slow in the middle of 1 and 2. It made his exit slow off of 2. That was all because of what Martin Truex Jr. did on the launch that he got. He took the opportunity away from Joey Logano to just merge up in front of him because he was there. And Joey can't judge where Martin Truex Jr. is more at this racetrack than anywhere we go. So knowing all that as a driver, am I now going to say, okay, I'm going to take the top. I'm going to pick the top, and I'm going to not let them, put me in that position. You just won the race picking the bottom. You just won all the restarts picking the bottom. That's what's difficult about this. Sometimes you have to give credit to your competition. They try hard too. And in this case, Martin Truex Jr., he just did a great job on the restart and took away what Joey Logano had on those previous restarts. And he goes and wins a race. Great job by Martin Truex.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Joey Logano, there was no second guessing. He did give credit to Truex and also said, hey, he had the best car. Maybe we underrate Truex a little bit, Jeff, as a restarter. I mean, clearly he's really, really good at it. But you also mentioned that this doesn't happen at other tracks. Since they changed Phoenix a couple of years ago and essentially put the dog leg in the restart equation, I mean, that's just unlike any other place really on the NASCAR circuit.
It's completely unlike anywhere else, and how you judge where you need to be going into turn one it's impossible. And then if you enter the corner and you're next to somebody and they've got a better angle of attack, that makes their car drive better in the corner. Like if you enter any corner at any racetrack, if you enter really, really, really low, much lower than you want to, that means you got to turn the wheel more, right, to get the car to go around the corner. And the car doesn't want to do that. Like, it doesn't, that's not what it wants to do. So you put the car in a position it doesn't want to be in, and that makes it difficult to get around the corner. So listen, I wrecked Danica Patrick there. I don't know what year it was. I wrecked her entering turn 3, what was then turn 3, I think.
Yeah.
It was then turn 3, is now turn 1. And if you watch it on video, it's like, damn, Burton just wrecked her. And it wasn't that at all. And It was that when I went to the bottom, we had a pit stop. We were coming up through the field. I went to the bottom, and I went to merge back on the track, and she started down and I started up, because it's a weird place. And if you watch it on video, it looks like I just went up there and wrecked her. And all it was that, just a misjudge of where that car was and when she was going to come down and when I was going to move up the racetrack, and more so there than any racetrack we go to. So that dog leg has created a very weird set of circumstances. And we used to deal with it after a restart. Now these drivers, they got to deal with it on the drop the green flag.
Yeah. I think that was 7 or 8 years ago that happened, 2012 or 2013. Like you said, then it was turn 3. Now that's turn 1, and that totally changes the game. Another thing we were talking about a year ago, Jeff, about the Phoenix race was Joe Gibbs Racing was not really in the ballpark at Phoenix a year ago. And really the championship 4, if you look at it, Denny Hamlin finished 4th and clearly had the 4th best car. The championship 4 last year at Phoenix, he was the only guy who didn't lead a lap. Chase Elliott, Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano were all up front. Denny Hamlin was solid, but he wasn't up front. So Hamlin finishes top 5. Truex wins the race. Does it feel like Joe Gibbs Racing solved its, I want to say problems, but clearly there were some shortcomings at Phoenix last year. Does it seem like JGR solved some of that, addressed some of that, and is that position them better for the title this year?
Oh, I believe so. I think that clearly they had good speed. Denny Hamlin ran really well. Obviously Truex ran well. So yeah, and listen, they've been running well. I think we expect. I think we have some unrealistic expectations in regard to teams and how they should dominate every race, right? And it's, the other teams work hard too. So it's not that easy. I clearly, Truex and Hamlin, we have become to expect to see them to run up front. That's just, they've been the best cars it gives for, I'd say a year and a half. And that's continuing so far this year. They just seem to have consistently more speed than the other two teams.
Yeah. And you're right. Like we have made a lot about teams and trends. And I know you love sports writers like me who love to oversimplify and overanalyze things. So I'm going to go there next.
Hey, listen, the fact that it's hard doesn't make it okay. Right? If you're a team, it's your job to dominate the race. That's what your literal existence is about, is to go win and dominate. So, I know how hard it is. So I tend to give teams a little bit of a break, but at the end of the day, that's what they're there to do. They're there to win and dominate.
Yeah. Well, certainly there hasn't been quite the domination this year with 5 new winners in 5 races to start the season, 5 winners in 5 races. In the odds powered by PointsBet Sportsbook, Martin Truex Jr. coming in the Phoenix was actually the heaviest favorite so far. He was 8-1, which made him the 5th most favored driver heading into this race. But clearly, Jeff, up until now, we've seen some unexpected winners. Michael McDowell at the Daytona 500 and Christopher Bell at the Daytona Road Course. So this is the first time there have been 5 winners in 5 races to start the season since 2017. And I went back and looked. It also happened in 2014, 2011, 2005. So 4 times it's happened in the last 16 years. All 4 of those times, there was a repeat winner in race 6. So how do you see things unfolding in 2021? Do you think the trend continues, or do you think we see one of these 5 guys win again in race 6?
I think we see a new winner. I think that I just, when I look through the field and I look at the drivers that I think can win, there's a lot of them there. There's a lot of drivers that I feel like can go to Atlanta and win the race that haven't already won this year. The question, Nate, for you is, are we going to get 17 winners before the playoffs? We've never had 16. We've never come to that position where somebody won a race and didn't make the playoffs. Like, is that possible in this year?
Yeah. Well, I'll throw this stat out at you. The last time we went more than 5 races without a repeat winner was 2003. First 9 races that year without a repeat winner. And in 2000, the first 10 races were run all by different drivers. Dale Jarrett, Bobby Labonte, Jeff Burton, Dale Earnhardt, Ward Burton, Rusty Wallace, Dale Jr., Mark Martin, Jeff Gordon, Jeremy Mayfield. Wasn't a repeat winner in 2000 until Dale Jr. At Richmond that year. So I don't know if we're going to see history repeat itself 20 plus years later.
Will we ever see a time where you can win a race and not make the playoffs?
I can't imagine that. I mean, do you think there'll be more than 16 winners? I don't think there will be. I think
so. Historically, no, there's no way. But
yeah.
we don't race now the way we used to race, and the schedule is completely different than the schedule used to be. So
yeah,
like, we're not comparing, apples and apples. It's a whole nother world. Listen, Rick Allen after race 3 sent me a text, because I've always said it's not going to happen, right? He sent me a text and said, Jeff, is this the year? And I'm like, nope, no way. And now I'm sitting here today doing, well, maybe. Like, it could be. With the road courses, it is possible. Like, it's possible. So, you got 2 plate races. You got those coming up. Like, yeah, I mean, it's possible. I don't think we'll see it, but it's possible.
That's been Letart's contention on this podcast, Jeff, is that you got 5 road courses, you got the Bristol Dirt Race, you got 2 more super speedways coming that, like, the regular season was almost all outliers, as we would call them. It's not a bunch of 1.5-mile tracks where you're going to get traditionally the same results, right?
Yeah, I mean, so it opens the door, I think, to something we've never seen before. But ultimately, I still, when I go back and look at the field, like, Michael McDowell was a surprise winner, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't consider William Byron as a surprise winner. Now, he wasn't a favorite, but he wasn't a surprise winner. So when I go through and I look and I say, okay, I've got to have 17 winners. How do I find 17 winners in these first races before the playoffs? I have a hard time finding 17. But it could. Listen, it could happen. But to do it, you're going to have more surprises than just. You're going to have 3 or 4 surprise winners, in my opinion, to make this happen.
Yeah, and I think one driver that we're probably all expecting will get a win eventually would be Kevin Harvick. And that is where NASCAR is heading next. Atlanta Motor Speedway, 1.5-mile race where Harvick is the defending winner. He's won 2 of the last 3 at Atlanta. I know we talked last week on Splash and Go, Jeff, about the struggles of Stewart-Haas Racing and Harvick, particularly at Las Vegas, but it seemed like they corrected some of that at Phoenix. Harvick ran up in the top 10. He wasn't the lights out Harvick that we've seen at Phoenix in the past, but what do you see happening there? And as we look forward to Atlanta, what are you expecting to see where, again, like 1.5-mile tracks, there's still a lot of them on the schedule, but maybe they're not quite the barometer they used to be.
Well, especially this racetrack. Like, this racetrack is, I mean, it's so unique from anything else. I mean, it's this thing has Kevin Harvick written all over it, where Kevin, I believe, well, number one, he's good everywhere, but where I think he's great is on racetracks where it's 100% discipline. Like, you have to do, like, if you miss your mark by this much, meaning you drive into turn 1 and your left side tires are, at the speeds that they're going are a foot off of where they need to be, and you're carrying a little bit too much speed, you never get where you need to get. And so, to me, where Kevin Harvick is just phenomenal is on places where you have to have an incredible feel of your car. You have to know the very limits of that car, where you can push that car and still get the car where it needs to be. And as a driver, that's everything. And what I mean to say, for people who haven't driven a race car, if I drive into Atlanta and I'm carrying 1 mile per hour too much, and I position my car just a little bit to the left or to the right in the wrong place, it doesn't allow me to be running the speed I need to be running when I get to the center of the corner, right? And so what Kevin Harvick is so good at is connecting all those dots. And that's what Atlanta is. Atlanta is about precision. It's about being perfect. in every single corner. And that's where Kevin Harvick is so strong. And that's where every driver and every engineer in the garage has been studying, how does Kevin Harvick drive Atlanta, right? And you would think that drivers could say, okay, this is what he does, and I'm going to go do it the way he does it. But it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Because the thing that you can't simulate and the thing that the data doesn't give the teams is the feel that Kevin Harvick has. He has a feel of his race car. You don't drive a race car like you do a video game with your eyeballs. You drive it with your butt. You drive it with your shoulders, with your ribs, with your legs, and what you feel. And that's what you can't simulate. And so Kevin Harvick knows what he wants to feel. He knows what his car needs to do for him and how he drives. And, if it was simple as everybody just copying Kevin Harvick, then everyone at Stewart-Haas Racing would run as fast as Kevin Harvick. Because not only do they know how he drives, they know exactly every single component on that race car. Hendrick Motorsports doesn't know that. Joe Gibbs Racing doesn't know that. They don't have that information. They have his driver data, but they don't have all the others. So it's not as easy as just saying, do what Kevin does. It's just not that easy. But that's what everybody's been trying to do. But this, in my opinion, is where Kevin is so good. I would be shocked to not see Kevin Harvick running up front with a chance to win this weekend.
Do you think, Jeff, that does Harvick or really any driver take extra satisfaction, or is there more gratification that what you're talking about, knowing that, like, hey, you can look at all my throttle traces and braking and all that stuff, you're still not going to beat me? And is that just a testament to how good Harvick is, that he can, at a track like Atlanta where tire wear is so important and, like you said, precision is important, that he's the best?
Yeah, you take huge pride in that. I mean, that's what you want to be. Like, you want to be. Listen, what you want to be as a race car driver is when back when we had practice. So what you wanted to be was the guy that everybody was looking how fast you're going. Like, we're going to have to watch Kevin Harvick. We're going to have to watch Denny Hamlin. We're going to have to watch Chase Elliott. How fast are they going? They're the barometer of where we are. And that's what you want as a race car driver. That's what you want. I had that for a little while at Darlington. I had that for a little while at New Hampshire. And man, you roll up in there and you're like, I'm the man. Like, that's you. And because you respect your competition,
yeah,
right? You respect them. And if they're watching you as the guy to beat, that's the ultimate compliment. Respect of your peers is the ultimate compliment. And that's what that is. It's simply showing respect. And listen, you've heard Denny Hamlin talk about this same thing. Like, if you look at his driver data, like, what? Like, how do you make sense of that? Like, it's everybody has their own style. And you go to Martinsville, or you go to some places where Denny is so good, it's just not as easy as looking at his data and saying, well, he's the guy to beat, so you got to drive the car like this. No, it doesn't work like that, because the inputs that the driver feels are completely different from one driver to the next.
Yep. It's great stuff. Great insight, man. Hey, really appreciate you coming on here and being a part of this again. I promise we won't let this go a year plus. Well, hopefully there won't be any pandemics in our future either. So maybe we can do this in person next time.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do it.
All right, man. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you, buddy.
Hey, motorsports fans, thanks for watching. Make sure you hit subscribe before you go for all the latest news and highlights across motorsports.